Professor Hugh Crossingham has said that no species is common anymore in southeast Queensland. We are a continent which has species which occur nowhere else. He says that every species, plant and fauna, should be considered as rare and endangered. He looks with expertise. He knows climate change and the fact that so many species will have to adapt to so much. There is no such thing as a climate change skeptic. There may be a skeptic about theology. A skeptic is someone who looks but doesn't have faith. There's nothing to do with that in climate change. The evidence, as my son, who's a scientist, often tells me, is there. There may be disputes over certain amounts of velocity or time. The evidence is there, and we must take it into consideration. Mudgeeraba is where I'm running, which will be called into question in a stereotypical way, perhaps, if we get any press at all, because I don't live there. The reason that I'm not running for Coomera, which is dear to my heart, or Gavin, which is also where I live, on the borders there, is because Mudgeeraba has the World Heritage Area. We have the pyramids in our midst, and we cannot have kiosks beside them. It is a World Heritage Area. The Labor government spent $40 million showing it up. They have not taken properties that have been taken from people who didn't want to sell. We want more protection from a separate act from the Green Party. We have species there that proliferate in no other area in these numbers. Dr. Isla Quito, the expert, has said that if the park wasn't like that, it was flattened out, people would be more conscious of the cornucopia of species which exist in there. The flying foxes are essential to our children's future life. When you look at your grandchildren, thank the flying foxes, because their pollination of the rainforests means that our children will breathe. Once when I was teaching at one of the schools on a very hot day, one of the high school students stood up and said, "Miss, can I go out there and drink?" And I said, "No," and shut all the windows. They looked at me in astonishment. I said, "We are studying rainforests here. That is transpiration. If you shut all the windows of the planet, that is what will happen. We get our rainfall from the rainforests, we get our oxygen from the forests. If you take away the flying foxes, those pollinations will not occur. There are certain rainforest species which will not occur unless they pass through the system of a flying fox. It is not a question of valuing one species more than another. It is a question of valuing the species, and the flying foxes are key species. Some species we could lose, sadly, and have done so without affecting human future. Flying foxes and bees, now declining in America, are two of those species. Red tape is essential. It means compliance, it means having a development and making sure that the person who is taking out those resources contributes to the future by giving social or environmental infrastructure charges. The Greens want that. Drew Hutton is someone who, at one stage, when he walked through Toowoomba, some of the people there would threaten to shoot him in an idle but perhaps somewhat not unserious way. As soon as they realised that he was speaking for the agricultural land, his reception there changed. And yet he has always been saying the same thing, which is the environment is intrinsic to our livelihood. In Mudgeeraba, the national park is of extraordinary importance. It is not something that is just a tourist venue. It is a water catchment area, and it is a storehouse of scientific importance for the future. The Greens want the reinstigation of the policy which is brought in by the Goss government of open space purchasing, so that people who have ordinary recreational needs, they want a picnic, they want to walk in bushland, need not be walking through national parks which serve a dual purpose, science and, of course, recreation, but recreation of the ordinary kind can be had in bushland areas, not necessarily in these storehouses for the future. There was less than 1% of Queensland purchased in national parks 20 years or so ago. It was a shocking indictment of previous governments that was the case. The governments since then have purchased and increased the heritage of national parks, but Queensland has half the bird species of Australia. The biodiversity report, which the Wildlife Society put a submission on, shows us that we have a set of resources in Queensland which are unparalleled in the world. We shouldn't be just setting aside what is minimum. We need to be setting aside what will guard these resources which already, as we've lost 90% of our tree cover in 200 years, must make us pause. The environment is essential. Locally, the quarry issue is one which the Green Party will support the people who have bought residences in the understanding that if town planning development occurs, they are not going to be suddenly subject to industrial development going through under special legislation. It is shocking that we have such poor planning that amenity collides with economic needs. But the Green Party are supporting the right of the community here to have invested in their particular patch and not to have industry against that. Of course, we have instances where self-monitoring has not been of no use. The barrier reef, at first the agricultural community was asked to monitor the legislation which has come in under the current government to make sure that the barrier reef is somewhat protected is really necessary. But the Greens are focusing on issues like Gladstone Harbour. There are certainly issues where the current government can improve. We have deep worries about an LNP government particularly because of uranium mining. We know that uranium mining will go ahead, or we suspect that under the LNP government there are projects ready to take off. My father resigned from the RSL over the issue. He was returned service and a prisoner of war. Once the RSL took a position on that many years ago, he resigned because he knew even at that stage that we have no way to process the waste. We cannot have a cruise ship terminal if we haven't got a harbour. It is awkward. Peter War wants to dispute, and one of them came in and said, I want to play Tarzan. I'm eager for the part, and the other comedian said, I don't think you're quite suitable. You have a wooden leg. It's the same with us. We don't have a harbour. The dredging will be enormously expensive. It will be much more cost effective to market the Gold Coast properly. That hasn't been done for many years. I think the tourist promoters will sleep at the helm. We need to bring people down in shuttle buses to our glorious city, and they'll be glad to leave the dull port and see the beautiful city. It's quite easy. There are many more things that I could say, but I'm sure I've used up 5 to 8 minutes. Thank you for your attention.